The Tale of the Three Trees. Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. Could you imagine being a tree and wondering what you want to do when you grew up? Trees are made from wood, so maybe they would want to become a clothespin, or maybe they would want to become little blocks that children play with. Do you see things made of wood around you at home? It could be a chair or furniture. What do you want to do when you grow up? The first little tree looked up at the stars, twinkling like diamonds above him. I want to hold treasure, he said. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I want to be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. Have you ever seen a treasure chest? Look at this one. It's made from wood. And what can we find in it? Well, we can find some beautiful golden jewelry. I also have here a golden cup. And in a treasure chest, we find a lot of money. The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling down by its way by the ocean. I want to be a strong sailing ship, he said. I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful kings. I want to be the strongest ship in the world. Maybe it's a ship that looks like this one, or maybe it's a bigger one. And the third tree looked down below into the valley, below the busy man and the busy woman working in the busy town. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all, she said. I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and they will think of God. I want to be the tallest tree in the world. Years passed. The rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. And one day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. 1, 2, 3. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me." With the swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. Now I shall be made into a beautiful treasure chest, he thought. The first tree, I shall hold wonderful treasure. The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It will be perfect for me." With the swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. Now I shall sail mighty waters, thought the second tree, and I shall be a strong ship for the kings. The third tree fell, her heart sank. When the last woodcutter looked at her way, she stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven. She didn't want to be cut, remember? But the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chest. Instead, he worn hands fashioned the tree into a fed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was now not covered with gold or filled with treasure. It was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ship were being made that day. Instead, the one strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat. Too small and too weak to sail the ocean, even a river, he was taken into a small lake. And every day he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumber yard. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was to stay on the mountaintop and point to God. Many days and nights passed. The three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the fed box. Do you know who those people are? Could it be Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus? I wish I could make a cradle for him, her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. This manger is beautiful, she said, and suddenly the first tree knew that he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep and the second tree quietly sailed out into the lake. Soon the thundering and crashing storm arose, and the little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched his hands, and said, "Peace." And the storm stopped as quickly as it begun. And suddenly the second tree knew that he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. See, this is Jesus and his disciples. On Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. It's Jesus carrying the cross. But one Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful, the second tree strong, and every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God, looking at the cross. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world.